Recording in
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Whoever had basically confirmed, Yogesh has not joined yet. 82. Zoom user. Who is Zoom user? Who is Zoom user?
Zoom, I am using Zoom.
नहीं नहीं, आपका तो समीर खंडेलवाल नाम से दिख रहा है. Somebody called Zoom user. He was
हाँ,
there earlier also, but
okay.
who is it? No, he doesn't tell. So anyway, these are not any confidential or anything. Okay, so we'll start. 8-3 already. We'll start. We have to begin the new chapter today, the core of the teaching. So who would like to? अभी किसी ने नहीं पढ़ा. हिमांशु जी ने लास्ट टाइम पढ़ा था. समीर जी, would you like to read?
नहीं, मैं नहीं पढ़ा.
You won't read. Okay. Harsh ji doesn't read usually. Dhaval bhai. Uh, ठीक है. Anybody who wants to read can read. Then it's free, open.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, please. अच्छा,
Can
Zoom
you
user is Aurora ji. Okay.
can you just little bit increase the font?
That's better. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
The core of the
The core
teaching.
of the teaching, yeah. We know the divine teacher, we see the human disciple. It remains to form a clear conception of the doctrine, a clear conception fastening upon the essential idea. The central heart of the teaching is especially necessary here because the Gita, with its rich and many sided thought, its synthetical grasp of different aspects of the spiritual life, and the fluent, winding motion of its argument lends itself even more than other scriptures to one-sided misrepresentations born of a partisan intellectuality. The unconscious or half-conscious wresting of fact and word and idea to suit a preconceived notion or the doctrine or principle of one's preference is recognized by Indian logicians as one of the most fruitful sources of fallacy. And it is perhaps the one which it is most difficult for even the most conscientious thinker to avoid. For the human reason is incapable of always playing the detective upon itself in this respect. It is its very nature to seize upon some partial conclusion, idea, principle, become its partisan, and make it the key to all truth. And it has an infinite faculty of doubling upon itself so as to avoid detecting in its operation this necessary and cherished weakness. The Gita lends itself easily to this kind of error because it is because it is easy by throwing particular emphasis on one of its aspects or even on some salient and emphatic text and putting all the rest of the 18 chapters into the background or making them a subordinate and an auxiliary teaching. To turn it into a partisan of our own doctrine or dogma. Beautiful.
Yeah. So thank you for reading. Well, I've joined 8 Sameer ji, Dhaval, Himanshu, Archana ji, Arora ji, Yogesh. All right. So in the chapter number 2, the divine teacher, he had said that there are 3 things which are spiritually significant, typically symbolic. There he had mentioned the divine teacher, the human disciple, and the occasion of the teaching. And he clarifies on those 3 points there. But basically, in that sequence, first in chapter 2, he covers the divine teacher. Then in the next essay, the human disciple. Now he's going to sort of, I mean, not summarize, but yes, in a very, very broad sense, if you want to say, it is like what is the real message of the Gita that he's going to start here before beginning his proper commentary, verse by verse style. So we start again, just we know the divine teacher, we see the human disciple. It remains to form a clear conception of the doctrine, okay, the teaching, a clear conception fastening upon the essential idea. The central heart of the teaching is especially necessary here because the Gita, with its rich and many sided thought. So, as we know, the 3 main yogas that are covered in the Gita, the Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. But other than that, also, there are hints about mind control, Raja Yoga in the 6th chapter. There's little bit of mention of Hatha Yoga, Pranayam in few verses. And that apart, basically, the thought of the Gita, क्षात्र धर्म के ऊपर है, स्वभाव स्वधर्म के ऊपर है, विभूति के ऊपर है. बेसिकली द थॉट इज वेरी वेरी, इट्स वेरी मेनी साइडेड एंड रिच एंड कॉम्प्लेक्स. सो दैट इज one of the things. It's synthetical grasp of different aspects of the spiritual life. Okay? So spiritual life के लिए it's not just one thing. भक्ति केवल है, या you fall into a sort of dry knowledge tendency, or you fall into the tendency of simply acting and acting without क्या कहते हैं, trying to enlighten that action by knowledge, thinking that after all, the Gita wants me to be a karma yogi and therefore I must act incessantly, all that sort of thing. And the other aspects of spiritual life, इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें आती हैं, about the Akshara Brahman, the static, basically the nirvanic condition, and like to see the divine everywhere, Vasudeva Sarvamiti, all those things basically. Then in the 9th chapter, he tells about the transcendent aspect of the divine. So all this, when it translates into the human consciousness, into the consciousness of the sadhak, how it basically relates to his own spiritual life, his or hers, right? So yeah, synthetical grasp of different aspects of the spiritual life and the fluent winding motion of its argument lends itself even more than other scriptures to one-sided misrepresentations born of a partisan intellectuality. So the thought is very rich, very many-sided. It is trying to synthesize. For example, the three things, the systems that the Gita synthesizes is Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. Okay? There is a proper chapter dedicated to that. So we'll wait for that chapter to come, right? Then fluent winding motion of its argument, like we saw, we said last time or time before last, that in the 3rd chapter, so he asks that, tell me decisively what to do. He is told. Then again in the 4th chapter, there is about Jnana Karma Sannyasa. Again in the 5th chapter, he's asking, basically you feel he's asking the same question. And the argument goes like this, It's not smooth. He's constantly questioned, and it's a sort of argument going on, which basically gets settled only when the cosmic form is seen. And that is just the conversation part, but even from Krishna's side, so much is said. It is so packed basically. It is so much packed, and each of the points in itself is so rich that there can be the tendency to dwell exclusively on that depending on your own individual temperament. This is essentially what Sri Aurobindo is saying here. All right. So, because sided representations born of a partisan intellectuality, and we do tend to be partisan towards one thing or the other, that is there in most human beings. So, nothing very, exceptional about it if somebody has made this error. So, now the unconscious or half conscious resting of fact. Resting का मतलब होता है twist करना. Okay? Taking hold of it and sort of twisting it. पहले भी ये word आया था. And word and idea to suit a preconceived notion or the doctrine or principle of one's preference is recognized by Indian logicians as one of the most fruitful sources of fallacy. Most fruitful sources of fallacy. And it is perhaps the one which it is most difficult for even the most conscientious thinker to avoid. Yeah. We are also having these preconceived notions about, yoga ke bare mein, divine ke bare mein, world ke bare mein, everything. So, for us practically, this suggests what it does is, suggests is to get rid of these preconceived notions from ourselves, our own preferences, so that we can learn from Sri Aurobindo or Essays on the Gita exactly what he wants to teach and not what is colored by our own already formed mindset. Okay. Practically, this is what it means for us. Okay? But here he's pointing out to, I'll give an example here, Shankaracharya from the Letters on Poetry and Art. I have culled out that reference. So, regarded as by Indian listeners one of the most fruitful sources of fallacy. Important is just I'm reading it again. The unconscious or half-conscious resting of fact and word and idea. Even the word, because, you can give it a different connotation, उससे उसका meaning बदल जाता है. संस्कृत के literature में हुआ है. It's I know the example, it's from the Chandogya Upanishad. वो तत्वमसि की जगह, तत्वमसि श्वेतकेतो की जगह, you take the from the श्वेतकेतो के end and make it atatvam like that. So this kind of distortion does happen. Idea का भी distortion. Maya, for example, the idea of Maya it has been distorted very badly from what it meant originally in the Vedic times. The original meaning of the word Maya is the divine power. And the current meaning of the word Maya is illusion and deception and all that, right? Trickery, fraud. That is not the original meaning of the word Maya, right? And several other things like this. So, and it is perhaps the one which it is most difficult even for the most conscientious thinker to avoid. Why? For the human reason is incapable of always playing the detective upon itself in this respect. It is its very nature to seize upon some partial conclusion. You know, हमको कुछ बड़ा चीज मिला. We read the Gita till the time we finally reach the 700th verse. Something might appeal to us very strongly, and then we just dwell, and we can even have a tendency to stay there and not move forward. इसीलिए the Mahavakya which is given in the 18th chapter, Sri Aurobindo has already kind of hinted it, and again in this chapter he is going to tell it, and he's going to clarify basically one major misconception regarding the Gita in this essay, right? So some partial conclusion, idea, principle become its partisan and make it the key to all truth, and it has an infinite faculty of doubling upon itself so as to avoid detecting in its operations this necessary and cherished weakness. The Gita lends itself easily to this kind of error because it is easy by throwing particular emphasis on one of its aspect, or even on some salient and emphatic text, and putting all the rest of the 18 chapters into the background, or making them subordinate and auxiliary teaching to turn into a partisan of our own doctrine or dogma. So here the example that I want to share in this context is verse number 4th chapter ka 33, second part. Sarvam karma khilam partha jnane parisamapyate. And the example that this kind of mistake has been done by Shankaracharya ji, the great Shankara, right? So if I do this, is this changed on the screen now? Can you see the letters on poetry or not?
Yeah, it's changed. We can see.
Yes. So this part basically, the part in italics is by the disciple, non-italics is Sri Aurobindo. So he says, in Shankara's Bhashya on the Gita, he seems to take any opportunity to thrust in the ideas of karma sannyasa and jnana nishtha. For example, in the famous shloka Karmanyavadhikaraste, the Bhashya speaks of jnana nishtha, though it seems quite irrelevant, right? So, and then, of course, there is nothing about jnana nishtha in the text, only in Shankara's thrust. Okay? Shankara considers all karma useful only as preparation for jnana. According to him, even the object of the Gita is, this is from the commentary of Shankara, original Sanskrit, Param Nishreyasa Sansarasya, whatever. The object of the Gita was to make Arjuna act, that is fight. And it is only when he consented to do so that Krishna stopped the discourse. Very important, right? If it had been as Shankara says, if it had been as Shankara says, he would not have stopped until he had got Arjuna well started for a cave in the Himalayas, far away from the noise of the battle. Of course, this is humorous, half humorous. Sri Aurobindo is not, just making fun of him. But the point here is that, the idea of Jnana Yoga, and once you have attained knowledge, then that is it basically. And then the idea of the gospel of inaction basically. That is what, like in another aphorism, Sri Aurobindo says, Shankara stormed about India preaching inaction. It's a contradiction in terms. Because what you are doing on your own is you're storming about the whole country. In the lifespan of 32 years, it is said that thrice he took the whole length and breadth of the country he covered. So it's unbelievable. And in those days, transport and all, right? But what are you teaching? Inaction, right? So this is because of fixating on one part of the Gita. He will give the example of fixating on devotion. He will give the example of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, how he fixated on Karmanyavadhikaraste. All that will come, right? But this is just an example. I mean, see, Shankara, it's not that Sri Aurobindo does not recognize his importance. Clearly, in unmistakable terms, he says, but for Shankara, we would not be Hindus today. Okay? If Shankara were not there, we would probably be Buddhists or Jains or something like that. So the importance of Adi Shankaracharya is incalculable in the history of Indian this thing. But, that time this was the teaching that he could give, and whatever was up to his best understanding. And he's saying here, it's not just him. It is the human reason is incapable of playing upon itself the detective. We are not able to see our own this thing. Why? He says cherished weakness and necessary weakness. Why is he using the word necessary? Because the mind moves from limitation to lesser limitation. It cannot move abruptly from light, from some kind of limit to infinity. It's a gradual process. So, in that process of widening knowledge, naturally you will be attached to some idea. If we look at ourselves honestly, we will find that we are attached to, yes, Dhavalji, will come to you. We are attached to some conception of the divine, some idea regarding yoga, maybe one of the three yogas we are more attached, something or the other. So basically, he's pointing to a general human weakness. I have given an example of that. Yes, Dhaval bhai, tell me.
So this everyone experiences, as you said, right? Because
Yeah.
in this case, Shankara dwelled on jnana. Maybe
None.
somewhere, because after every plateau there is a climb again. That is what I have observed in my own
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
We
yeah,
all dwell upon it until you become,
yeah.
fully aware of that. You've extracted the, so to say, the rasa from it, and then you start again the journey of climbing again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. There is a Vedic verse regarding this. Yat sano sanum aruhat bhurihi aspashta kartvam. Sanu means hill. So as you
Oh,
climb further and further hill, the more it becomes clear to you that which is the complete vision. This is
nice.
quoted by Sri Aurobindo in one of his books, I think, The Human Cycle.
Acha.
Yat sanoh sanum aruhat. As you climb hill after hill in the climb of yoga, bhurihi aspashta kartvam or something. It's Vedic, so the Sanskrit is a little different. So the more and more the picture becomes clear to you, right?
Yeah, nice.
That's
Interesting. Yeah.
okay.
Thanks,
So
thanks. Yeah.
this is just the first paragraph, and I mean this is a very important reference. कि even somebody like Shankaracharya's authority, and अच्छा, I must say here, मैंने पहले भी बोला, I am just reiterating the point. 2 points. First, कि I said earlier that Sri Aurobindo liberated the Gita. Earlier it came, then it fell, Buddhist interlude happened, then it fell into the hands of the acharyas, then it fell into the hands of the modern commentators. All of them dealt with it in the best way that they knew it. Okay, but all of those interpretations are what? They are somewhat partial. Sri Aurobindo, because of who he is and his, integral realization and everything, and Krishna was his guru. If we are looking at the essays on the Gita, it's better to, more practical to look at Sri Aurobindo as a sadhak and a, that way a bhakta. So Krishna himself was his guru. How many people would be able to say, who have commented before, ki I am hearing the voice of Krishna and he is teaching me the Gita and he placed the Gita in my hands? So basically, Sri Aurobindo was in a very, I mean, by virtue of his avatarhood, again, I have to use that word, by virtue of his privilege of having Sri Krishna himself as his guru, he is given the most clear interpretation of the Gita without any partisanship. Okay? This is number one regarding. Second, that he has freed the Gita, basically. What was the second point? Shankaracharya related here. Yes. Ki most of the commentators, because actually, as far as the Gita is concerned, see, it is there in the Mahabharata. There are 18 verses in the Bhishma Parva and whatever. Scholars say that it is when Shankara, he took that out from the Mahabharata and commented upon it, that is when the popularity of the Gita itself increased. Otherwise, it was not so well known or not so popular. This I have heard. Somebody told me that Vivekananda said this in one of his volumes. If I'm able to find out, I'll share. So basically, Shankaracharya was the first proper commentator on the Gita. And because of the great respect that he enjoys, because of being the re-establisher of Hinduism and all, even in today's times, you will find most of the Swamis, okay, they will be frightened of going against or in any way different from the commentary of Shankaracharya. They will be basically not having the, what should I say? They will not challenge him that way. So Sri Aurobindo, जो मैंने देखा है, Sri Aurobindo is openly does it because the limitations of the Vibhuti have to be corrected by the avatar. However great the Vibhuti may be, and however luminous the limitations may be, if you want to call it. Right? So these are the two things. इसके बाद I think we can move forward in this chapter. So Dhaval ji has read small paragraph. Next one, who would like to read? Archana ji, would you like to read? Please.
Thus, there are those who make the Gita teach not works at all, but a discipline of preparation for renouncing life and works. the indifferent performance of prescribed actions or of whatever task may lie ready to the hands becomes the means, the discipline. The final renunciation of life and works is the sole real object. It is quite easy to justify this view by citations from the book and by a certain arrangement of stress in following out its argument, especially if we shut our eyes to the peculiar way in which it uses such a word as sannyasa, renunciation. But it is quite impossible to persist in this view on an impartial reading in the face of the continual assertion to the very end that action should be preferred to inaction and that superiority lies with the true, the inner renunciation of desire by equality and the giving up of works to the Supreme Purusha.
Right. Thank you. So yeah. Thus, there are those who make the Gita teach not works at all, but a discipline of preparation for renouncing life and works. You know, Sarvam Karma Akhilam Jnane Parisamapyate. You have attained knowledge and Naishkarmya, and basically Naishkarmya does not mean giving up the outer action. It means a state of inner actionlessness. Right? When we covered the outline, so in the 4th chapter, Jutha section on the verses of karma. So कर्मण्य कर्मयः पश्येत् अकर्मणि च कर्मयः सबुद्धिमान मनुष्येषु स युक्तः कृत्स्न कर्मकृत्. He who sees action in inaction and inaction in action, he is a yogi, he is intelligent among men, and he is a doer of all action. So that is what Naishkarmya means. An inner state of actionlessness where you're having that perfect stillness and silence within you, which gives great power, actually the true power to your action. It does not mean giving up the works entirely. This is a misinterpretation, a wrong explanation of the Gita. Okay? Thus, there are those who make the Gita teach not works at all, but a discipline of preparation for renouncing life and works, the indifferent performance of prescribed actions. Niyatam karma, prescribed ka nahi. Niyatam would be controlled. Prescribed ke liye, what would be the word in the Gita? Vidhivat or something, vidhi purvakam or something aisa hoga, or of whatever task may lie ready to the hand becomes the means, the discipline. The final renunciation of life and works is the sole real object. Now, as Indians, this tendency is still very deeply inside us. So while we read this and when we read this again, this is something we have to correct from our minds, that the sole aim is not the sole real. I mean, you are born because you have to live life. It's totally contradictory. You are born because you have to find the divine in life, and you have to fulfill the divine in life, and you have to fulfill the divine in the world. This is the correction made by Sri Aurobindo, right? Not the final renunciation of life and works being the sole real object. That is not the case. Now, it is quite easy to justify this view by citations from the book. You take one, he'll give examples, Bankim Vagara ka example wo aayega isme abhi. And by a certain arrangement of stress in following out its argument, especially if we shut our eyes to the peculiar way in which it uses such a word as sannyasa. Sannyasa मैंने पहले भी explain किया था, means totally placing something. Nyasa means to place. ठीक है, शिलान्यास जैसे होता है ना, foundation रखना, stone रखना. Nyasa means, sanya means completely. तो completely placing. तो एक तरह से उसको बाहर रख दिया, external कर दिया, like that. But renunciation. But it is quite, isme, for example, in the 18th chapter, this whole problem of inner renunciation versus outer renunciation, just to make sure that this doubt does not remain, the 18th chapter begins with this question, that what is tyaga and what is sannyasa, that you tell me clearly. And then Krishna says that, 18.2 mein wo batate hain कि what tyaga is superior, he says, and what is the real sannyasa. But this I am not showing on the screen, but in the 18th chapter, the first 5 verses, right? So he says here, in the first 5 of these verses, the Gita so phrases its statement that it shall be applicable to both the way of the inner and the way of the outer renunciation. And yet, in such a manner, this is on page 528, second paragraph I'm reading, and yet in such a manner that one has only to assign some of their common expressions a deeper and more inward meaning to get the sense and thought of the method favored by the Gita. I'll read this again slowly. It's important. What is the method favored by the Gita? The method favored by the Gita is that of Tyaga, internal renunciation. And as the Gita says, if you do not renounce inwardly and you are only renouncing outwardly, but you are having desires inside, mithyacharaha sa uchyate. It is nothing but hypocrisy. Okay. So, yeah, kamyanam karmanam nyasam sanyasam kavayo viduhu sarva karma phalatyagam prahustyagam vichakshana 18.2. That the giving up of desirable actions, action ko hi tyag diya, that is what is called sannyasa. And sarva karma phalatyaga, you give up the fruit of the work, that is what is called tyaga, right? And this sentence I'll just read again. In the first 5 of these verses, in the 18th, I said earlier that we might have to do this back and forth because, this is how basically you have to see the Gita in its totality, right? The Gita so phrases its statement that it shall be applicable to both the way of the inner and the way of the outer renunciation, and yet in such a manner that is one has only to assign to some of their common expressions a deeper and more inward meaning in order to get the sense and thought of the method favored by the Gita. And even the Gita says, he who has no jneya sa nitya sannyasi yo na dveshti na kankshati. Such a person should be considered as the true sannyasi who does not have any na dveshti, he does not have any repulsion, nor does he have any kankshati, means a strong desire for something. That is the true definition of sannyas, not giving up things. Such a person should be considered as a nitya sannyasi. I'm just looking for the verse here. Jneya sa nitya sannyasi yo na dveshti na kankshati. This 5.3, the first part of that. Okay, is that clear? So this important distinction between the tyaga, the inner renunciation, and sannyasa. But the point that Sri Aurobindo is making here is basically by interpreting the word sannyasa or the word tyaga according as it suits your temperament or the way your thought has been structured and all, it can easily be misinterpreted, and that is something that has happened in the history of the Gita.
Anmol?
This kind of, yes, just I'm finishing.
Yeah.
So this kind of thing has happened. I already gave the most strong example that I could, right? Of the, a word that is used over there. Of course, disciple thrust word. कि उसके अंदर ठोस दिया है, जबरदस्ती उसमें डाल दिया. It is not there. It is not there. That kind of idea of giving up actions completely and all, it is not there. It is in the Shankara's commentary that idea comes, right? So just I'll finish this sentence, but it is quite impossible to persist in this view on an impartial reading. We need to be as objective as we can. Okay? In face of the continual assertion to the very end that action should be preferred to inaction. For this, there is a 3.8 mein, karma jyayo hi akarmana. Action is superior to inaction. Exact words in Gita. Karma jyayo hi akarmana. Okay, 3.8. And then again in 5.2, the Gita says, sannyasah karma yogascha nishreyasa karamubhav. Then tayostu karma sannyasat karma yogo vishishyate. Karma sannyasat means than karma sannyasa, karma yogo vishishyate. Karma yoga is superior to karma sannyasa. Clearly the Gita says. All right. If anything is left in that?
Yeah.
And the superiority lies with the true, the inner renunciation of desire by equality and the giving of works to the Supreme Purusha. Yes. Yes, sir. Tell me, Yogesh ji.
Yeah. So you just now made a statement, both the way of the inner
and the outer.
Nancy.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
if you just break it down, if you see the first part of the outer renunciation is easy. The moment you say that I'm not acting out of the fruit,
Yeah.
the fact that initially, if you see, the ego consciousness always acts because of the fruit outcome that we are. So the outer renunciation is the first part, which is easy to understand. Here, when he's
Outer
talking about-
renunciation means you stop acting. आप काम करना ही बंद कर दो, कुछ करना ही बंद कर दो. You just
No.
stop engaging, stop acting.
Correct. Here he's saying that both need to be done. What you emphasized on this paragraph you read of 528, you were saying that this is the way, right? That both need to be done. So it is not the
What is the
outer.
both that need to be done? Outer and inner both.
I read that line you said, na, both the way of the inner and the way of the outer renunciation.
It shall be applicable to both. Mane ki it is how you are able to read the text. So you can use the word tyaga and the word sannyasa. You can use it interchangeably. It depends upon the commentator. That is what he's trying to say there. But the clear thing is that tyaga means inner renunciation and sannyasa means outer, and the Gita prefers tyaga to sannyasa.
Okay.
This is what it means.
Perfect.
आप
Thanks.
अगर त्याग भी बोलो तो त्याग का मतलब त्याग दिया मैंने, ये सब त्याग दिया मैंने, दुनिया त्याग दी. People, sometimes they get even get the surname त्यागी. ये कितने बड़े त्यागी हैं, कितना महान त्याग कर दिया है. But that is not the real त्यागा. The real त्यागा is the त्यागा of desire. आपके अंदर तो डिजायर भरी हुई है और आपने त्याग दिया, तो इट्स नॉट त्याग, इट इज मिथ्याचार. It is better to be a honest sadhak than to be a respected hypocrite.
True.
Yeah. And I mean, spiritual circles, maybe there is a lot of hypocrisy that goes on. My job here is not to point out those things. Our job as seekers is to look at our own defects. But it is a fact. We see so much nautanki and drama and tamashabaji in the name of spirituality. Because जो असली चीज है जो वो तो कर नहीं रहे. And again, it is because of not reading books like Essays on the Gita, which it's not their fault also. What they have learned from the tradition, that only they will do. They have not read the Essays on the Gita. So they will not get the right idea about it. And Shankaracharya की तो स्तुति करने में लगे हुए हैं सब लोग. Nobody has the, this thing to be able to say कि नहीं, Shankara is great. He is very great. Sri Aurobindo says he's one of the greatest intellects ever born. No doubt about it. But where his limitation is there, that needs to be called and that needs to be corrected. Right? So this tendency of blind reverence and all, और जो होता है, and basically the point here is not all these things, social and cultural and all this. Point here is mainly about the inner thing, being honest to yourself. Have I truly overcome this? For example, I mean the first paragraph था, मैंने side में लिखा हुआ था कि cherished weakness and all. Reason was the helper, reason is the bar. So if my reason is making me getting stuck at a particular idea or word or thought or some kind of opinion, until I am convinced that, this is not the real thing, I will not go forward. Reason is the helper also. Reason is the bar. Similarly, वो कहते हैं, desire is the helper, desire is the bar. It is desire that makes you come out of your tamas. It is desire that makes you come out of your tamas. It is the rajoguna. अगर कुछ इच्छा ही नहीं होगी तो you will just sink into tamas. But then desire is the bar. Because then the sattva guna and the gunatita avastha are not able to come. Right? So this is the main point so far.
Anmolji, when you said this phrase, when you said this phrase, which Sri Aurobindo has said for ego, desire and all,
yes.
conjures up an image of a ladder. You use the same rung, climb, but then you have to renounce it to climb higher.
Exactly.
It just is so...
Exactly.
And the other point is all these mutt people will stand up against you. Because they will not like that somebody is, pointing out to their...
And I mean, a lot of things. I mean, the Mathas, for example, the whole Dashanami Sampradaya and order, that was established by Shankaracharya. And I mean, okay, they will be genuine sannyasis and all, but some of those people, they go into it for some kind of easy life. And जिन्होंने उनकी रोजी रोटी का इंतजाम किया है, वो सारा उनको प्रतिष्ठा मिल रही है, सब कुछ मिल रहा है, they are not going to challenge that person. Of course, there is genuine respect and all that, which is true. But then there is not the courage to call out the limitation. And that is not, I mean, जैसे मैंने पहले बोला था, I had quoted that footnote from the Synthesis of Yoga, that it was a Kshatriya bringing in his spirit of courage, who was the first discoverer of the truths of Vedanta. So that Kshatriya spirit, that courageous spirit of wanting truth and nothing but the truth and not settling for any limitation, that is what is desired of a sadhak. Okay, not blind. I mean, this point has been made already too much. We need not, we are not even Shankara. If we were as bright and जितना Shankar का intellect था, then बात ही क्या है. So he is very great and everything, but I mean, the reference I have already shown, right? I think we can move on. Shall we read further? So Yogesh ji, would you like to read the next paragraph? योगेश जी साइलेंट है. snapped for some reason. Am I audible?
Yeah, now you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Loud.
Yeah, 1 minute. The screen is visible or I have to share it again? I have to share it again.
I think you'll have to share it again.
Yeah, I'll do that. So, yeah. So, Yogesh bhai, would you read the next paragraph? Others again?
Yeah.
Please.
Others again speak of the Gita
Can't hear you.
and the high place it gives to quietistic emergence in the one self of all. And undoubtedly, its emphasis on devotion, its insistence on the aspect of the divine as Lord and Purusha, and its doctrine of the Purushottama, the supreme being, who is superior both to the mutable being and to the immutable, and who is what in his relation to the world we know as God, are the most striking and among the most vital elements of the Gita. Still, this Lord is the self in whom all knowledge culminates, and the master of sacrifice, to whom all works lead, as well as the Lord of love, into whose being the heart of devotion enters. And the Gita preserves a perfectly equal balance, emphasizing now knowledge, now works, now devotion, but for the purposes of the immediate trend of the thought, not with any absolute separate preference of one over the others. He, in whom all three meet and become one, he is the supreme being, the Purushottama.
Right. Thank you. So now he's covering the other limitation of exclusive emphasis being given to devotion, which is most commonly seen in the ISKCON circles. I mean, they are the ones who circulate and distribute the Gita the most. But if you read the commentary written by their founder, then you will find that uske andar there is an exclusive stress on that, and it kills a lot of the knowledge part of the Gita, or the dynamic parts which the Gita is teaching us, right? So others again speak of the Gita as if the doctrine of devotion were its whole teaching, okay, and put in the background its monistic elements. Monistic means basically the oneness. Mono means one, so that quiet emergence in all aayega isme. Advaita basically monistic elements, and the high place it gives to the quietistic emergence in the one self of all. By this is meant what is called the attainment of the Brahma Nirvana. So your ego is extinguished in the divine, and you are able to experience what is called the eternal repose. This phrase comes, you can Google in the PDF of the search in the PDF of the essays on the Gita, eternal repose. So there is that eternal repose of the Akshara Purusha. One is able to feel that. And then actually one gets the true power for action. From that perfect stillness, there is a beautiful essay by Sri Aurobindo called The Strength of Stillness, or something like this. I'll share the link. It's like 2 pages or something. Very, very powerful, where this point is driven home by him. Okay. Quietistic emergence in the one self of all. And undoubtedly, its emphasis on devotion, its insistence on the aspect of the divine as Lord and Purusha, and its doctrine of the Purushottama, the supreme being who is superior both to the mutable Kshara and to the immutable Akshara, and who is what in his relation to the world we know as God. So what is called Purushottama in the Gita? That is known by the simple word God, Bhagavan, Hindi mein, are the most striking and most vital among the most vital elements of the Gita. I have been saying every class practically that the main teaching main teaching in the sense, the new concept that the Gita gives, the new word it adds in the spiritual corpus literature is Purushottam. The word was not there before. Okay. And this whole idea of Purushottama, supreme being, without that bhakti was not possible. So this is Gita's, I mean, what to say? We can't even imagine without that, what we would be. So still, now he will balance it with the knowledge part. Still, this Lord is the self in whom all knowledge culminates. So for example, in the 15th chapter it comes, Vedaischa sarvaihi ahameva vedyam. I am that thing which is to be known by all the Vedas. And the word Veda literally means knowledge, right? The verse number for this is 15th chapter, verse number 15, the third quarter in that. It's Tintrishtup, right? So I am that which is to be known. So it culminates in him. He is the final objective of all knowledge, right? And the master of sacrifice, Adhiyajna, to whom all works lead, as well as the Lord of love. So all these three things, action, knowledge, and love, they are perfectly balanced by the Gita. But this balance is, not able to be maintained because of that partisan intellectuality and the limitations of the mind by most of the other commentators. The interpretations of the Gita that have been given till now. Into whose being the heart of devotion enters, and the Gita preserves a perfectly equal balance. Very important sentence, this one. The Gita preserves a perfectly equal balance, emphasizing now knowledge, now works, now devotion, but for the purposes of the immediate trend of the thought. There are portions where you might feel, oh, bhakti is everything. There are portions you might feel that jnana is everything. But no, that's why you have to see the book in its entirety. You have to have, that is why that outline thing which Yogesh ji asked us to give. So it was very useful. You get a whole picture ki Gita ka kya hai. Already in the beginning you get that idea, right? So that kind of thing. But for the purpose of only for the purposes of the immediate trend of the thought. It's just that 5, 10 verses or 20 verses where that aspect is being emphasized. Emphasis does not mean that that is the only thing. Okay. The key word here that Shobanda used, perfectly equal balance. Okay. Not with any absolute separate preference of one over the others. ये नहीं करती गीता. This is done by, limited interpreters of the Gita. उसमें और अभी examples आने वाले हैं. Okay. He in whom all three meet and become one. He is the supreme being, the Purushottama. What are these three? Works, knowledge, and devotion. But all three have to be there in order to know that Purushottama completely. Samagram Mam. Otherwise, you will not know some of his aspects or part of his totality. All right, this is very simple. The idea is strongly emphasized. Now, अब इसमें एक बहुत बड़ा major misconception वो clear करेंगे regarding the idea of duty, and this is not what Gita teaches. So, who would like to read?
Anmol, before
yes,
we
please.
proceed,
Yes.
in this paragraph, he talks about three entities and the relation which they have. Based
Yeah.
on the summary that you've done, I'll just read that line again. So he says, insistence on the aspect of the divine as Lord and Purusha, and its doctrine of the Purushottam, the supreme being, who's superior both. So it talks about Purushottama, the supreme being, that's one entity, and both the mutable being, the second entity, and to the immutable, the third being. And then he says, and what is and who is what in his relation to the world we know as God. So he says, जो पूरा world जिसको हम भगवान सोचते हैं, इसके ये तीन entities है, इनका क्या relation है? So you very well till what we've read right now.
नहीं, इनका तीनों का नहीं वो बोल रहे हैं. When he says who, then he's meaning the Purushottama. It is Purushottama which is known as God. It is not Akshara or Kshara which is called God. The synonym for God is Purushottama. Akshara is an aspect of that Purushottama. Sorry, Akshara is an aspect of that God. God के लिए अगर आपको single word synonym use करना है, it cannot be Akshara or Kshara. Mind it. It would be incorrect to understand like that.
Absolutely right. Thanks for clarifying. And when he said what in his relation, H is being capital here. His relation means Purushottama's relationship.
Yes, Purushottama's relation to the world. Yes.
So and he combines the world as both the Shara and the Akshara, or as you said here in this line, it's mentioned.
Shara is mutable being, Akshara is immutable. Huh?
Correct. So when the relation he's talking about, because he's saying Purushottama has a relation with the Shara and the Akshara, right? The Shara part or the mutable.
No, 1 second. Doctrine of the Purushottama, the supreme being who is superior both, and who is what is relation to the world we know as God. He's not talking here, he is talking about the relation of Purushottama to the world, and that relation is that of God. That is what he's saying.
Acha. So he is the God of both the mutable and the immutable.
Yes, of course, he's the God of everything. So for example, जो Akshara hai, it is also called Brahman. So in the last verse of the 14th chapter, he will say that I am the foundation of that Brahman. Brahmano hi pratisthaham. इसी चैप्टर में भी आने वाला है. We'll just wait and those parts will come. He is the
Perfect,
master of
perfect.
everything. Everything is his aspect. Only some aspects can be so great that we start thinking that this is everything. That is where we
Right.
have to remember, शुरू में हम बोल रहे थे शुरू से, सत्यम ज्ञानम अनंतम ब्रह्म. Truth by definition is infinite. So anything, any sense of limitation, and your soul warns you, कि no, 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 there is some limitation here. There is some narrowness here. The moment you find any narrowness or limitation, any finiteness, immediately one should understand that some compromise of truth is happening.
Beautiful. Thanks.
Right?
So,
Yeah. Anji.
Anmol bhai, that means in life divine, that's why Sri Aurobindo waited, no, after the higher planes of consciousness experience, I mean, which are above the mind, then he waited till the supermind, right? That's where the Purushottama, the lid, right?
नहीं. Supermind is a plane of that Purushottama.
Acha, is the plane of the Purushottama. Okay.
Yes, it is there clearly in a letter of Sri Aurobindo.
Acha, acha.
Supermind is a plane of consciousness through which the Purushottama manifests. Supermind is not the Purushottama. It is one of the poises of the Purushottama.
Below the three upper
अभी
three.
हम सुपरमाइंड वगैरह में न जाएं probably because
ठीक
या
है
तो
ठीक है ठीक है नहीं,
है
just
ना.
trying to map it out.
हाँ
That's the
हाँ
reason.
हाँ. इसमें आएगा फॉर एग्जाम्पल ममा योनिर महत ब्रह्म. ठीक है, सिंस यू हैव मेंशनड इट 14.3 में. सो ममा इज द पुरुषोत्तमा स्पीकिंग अबाउट हिमसेल्फ कि मेरी, एंड देयर ही
हाँ.
सेज द महत ब्रह्मा द सुपर माइंड इज माय वूम. So basically that is that Hiranyagarbha where he plants the seeds of creation, and that is where the real ideas are planted, and then those real ideas fructify and they become the manifestation.
Got it.
But that is his yoni, that is his womb, that is not he himself. Otherwise why would he say mama yoni?
Correct.
Right?
Hmm.
Okay. So next paragraph, yeah, that we can cover today. Who would like to read? Dhaval ji has read, Archana ji has read. और कौन पढ़ा है बचा है? Himanshu ji, would you like to read? Or Harish, would you like to read?
I'll read.
Please read Himanshu ji, please. ये यहाँ से, but at the present day.
Correct. But at the present day,
Yes.
since in fact the modern mind began to recognize and deal at all with the Gita, the tendency is to subordinate its elements of knowledge and devotion, to take advantage of its continual insistence on action, and to find in it a scripture of the Karma Yoga, a light leading us on the path of action, a gospel of works. Undoubtedly, the Gita is a gospel of works, but of works which culminate in knowledge, that is, in spiritual realization and quietude, and of works motived by devotion, that is, a conscious surrender of one's whole self, first into the hands and then into the being of the Supreme, and not at all of works as they are understood by the modern mind, not at all an action dictated by egoistic and altruistic by personal, social, humanitarian motives, principles, ideals. Yet, this is what present day interpretations seek to make the Gita. We are told continually by many authoritative voices that the Gita, opposing in this the ordinary ascetic and quietistic tendency of Indian thought and spirituality, proclaims with no uncertain sound the gospel of human action, the ideal of disinterested performance of social duties, nay, even, it would seem, the quiet, modern ideal of social service. To all this, I can only reply that very patently and even on the very surface of it, the Gita does nothing of the kind, and that this is a modern misreading, a reading of the modern mind into an ancient book of the present day European or Europeanized intellect, into a thoroughly antique, a thoroughly Oriental and Indian teaching. That which the Gita teaches is not a human but a divine action, not the performance of social duties, but the abandonment of all other standards of duty or conduct for a selfless performance of the divine will working throughout nature. Not social service, but the action of the best. the god possessed, the master man done impersonally for the sake of the world and a sacrifice to him who stands behind man and nature.
Right. Thank you. So this point which he has made here, it will be elaborated, again reiterated, etc. Also, he will correct some of the correct in the sense, make the corrective statements in the coming paragraphs. But for the moment, so but at the present day, so obviously this is a little contextual. This being the fourth essay, this would have come in August, September, October, November 1916. That is the time when this would have been first written. Okay. And I am not exactly sure how much the essays on the Gita was revised. It was not revised too much as far as I know. Life Divine was revised extensively. Savitri, obviously, we know. Savitri was not an Arya work that way. So, but little bit that time frame needs to be kept in mind. Okay, this is written by him 109 years ago. Some changes may have taken place. On the whole, it would be the same. Things don't change so fast. But in some exceptional cases or in some details, some changes may have happened. The time frame needs to be kept in mind slightly. Okay. So, but at the present day, since in fact the modern mind began to recognize and deal at all with the Gita. Okay. They got interested in it, European scholarship with the Gita in the 19th century, the first half of the 19th century. People like Emerson, I think Schopenhauer was also of that time, and some other eminent people, they started getting interested. Okay. So, and Indians may, the first thinker that he names here is Bankim. He does not name any other Indian thinker. Bankim का नाम वो लेते हैं. Tilak का commentary Gita का, it was written from when he was in jail. So 1908 to 1914, like that, 6 years. So, but at present, since in fact the modern mind began to recognize and deal at all with the Gita, the tendency is to subordinate its elements of knowledge and devotion. This we see, even जो अपना B.R. Chopra का serial आया था, what is the first shloka that he taught the whole country that way? Karmanyavadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. But that is not the Mahavakya. Sri Aurobindo will say this clearly. Okay. So subordinate its elements of knowledge and devotion to take advantage of its continual insistence on action and to find in it a scripture of the Karma Yoga, a light leading us on the path of action, a gospel of works. Okay. Undoubtedly, Gita is a gospel of works, but of works which culminate in knowledge. This is that 4.33. Sarvam karma khilam partha jnane parisamapyate. Okay. Culminate in knowledge, that is in spiritual realization and quietude. Now, this can be again, वही जो गीता के साथ प्रॉब्लम होता है, winding movement and going back and forth, वही थोड़ा सा यहाँ पे भी हो सकता है. So quietude does not mean that you have reached, मतलब सर्वम कर्मा किलम पार्था जनाने परिसमाप्यते, कि you stop acting outwardly. What is meant is inner quietude. What is meant is inner stillness, inner silence. All inner, not outer. Okay? This needs to be understood clearly. Otherwise, we will misunderstand essays on the Gita also. All right. So, yes, undoubtedly the Gita is a gospel of works. At another place in the letters, I believe he says, it is the greatest gospel of Karma Yoga ever given to mankind. I will try to find it out and share that exact sentence. It is the greatest gospel of Karma Yoga ever given to mankind. There is no doubt about this. There is no greater gospel of Karma Yoga than the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. But of works which culminate in knowledge, that is in spiritual realization and quietude. The purpose of those works is to make you reach spiritual realization. Not that you just, like a Rajasic person, keep acting from day to night and call yourself a Karma Yogi. No, that is not Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is when your action is united with the divine. वो आगे वाले इसमें आने वाला है, whether it is union with the divine will or not, whether that is there or not. Okay, and of works motived by devotion. So both the aspects, knowledge also and devotion also, not just works. Okay, that is a conscious surrender of one's whole self, first into the hands and then into the being of the Supreme. So first you are the instrument, into the hands, he uses you, and then into the being of the Supreme. Through that progressive yoga, you become so united that your whole being becomes united. This sense that I am the instrument, even this sense goes away. We had read that 5th chapter of the Mother, last paragraph. The last stage of this perfection will come when you are completely identified with the Divine Mother and feel yourself to be no longer another and separate being, instrument, servant, or worker. You do not feel that you are separate, but it will go by. First, you will feel into the hands. Into the hands. You will feel that we are being used by the Divine, that you are His instrument, and then into the being of the Divine. प्रवेष्टुम च 11th चैप्टर के लास्ट में आता है ज्ञातुम द्रष्टुम च तत्वेन प्रवेष्टुम च परंतप. You know me, you see me, and then you enter into my being. You enter into my consciousness fully. Praveshtum, that is the word. 11.54 में है. Okay? ज्ञातुम द्रष्टुम च तत्वेन प्रवेष्टुम च परंतप. Next, we'll cover this and then stop this paragraph. Important hai, the point that he's making here. Which, where is it? Yes. And not at all of works as they are understood by the modern mind, not at all action dictated by egoistic and altruistic. In one of the aphorisms, he says, altruism is often the sublimest form of selfishness. He says this. Exact mujhe I think this is what it is. Altruism is often the sublimest form of, because, oh, I am so altruistic. मैं तो इतना निस्वार्थ भाव से लोगों के लिए कर रहा हूं, but you're just feeding your own ego. Altruism is often the sublimest form of selfishness. No, I mean, you're so proud. Oh, wow, I'm so altruistic. I don't need anything in return. I'm such a great philanthropist and this and that. No, sir, you're only feeding your ego, like that. So, altruistic by personal, social, humanitarian motives. He will correct this. ऐसा नहीं है कि he is stopping you from doing social service or humanitarian works. No, he will make a point in the coming paragraphs. But for that, we will wait till the next session. But to say by personal, social, humanitarian principle, yet this is what present day interpretations seek to make of the Gita. Okay, we are told continually by many authoritative voices that the Gita, opposing in this the ordinary ascetic and quietistic tendency of Indian thought and spirituality, कि भाई तुम इंडियंस को तो केवल त्याग करना, ascetic करना आता है. गीता ये नहीं सिखा रही. गीता सिखा रही है कर्म करो. What does the Gita teach you? To do works. कर्म करो. ठीक है, that he will correct here. Okay. Proclaims with no uncertain sound the gospel of human action, the ideal of disinterested performance of social duties, nay, even it would seem the quite modern ideal of social service. All these things we bring in the Gita to justify all these things, right? To all this, I can only reply that very patently matlab evidently, clearly, and even on the very surface of it, the Gita does nothing of the kind, and that this is a modern misreading, a reading of the modern mind into an ancient book of the present day European or Europeanized intellect. That's what happens because of the English education and all. Into a thoroughly antique, very old and thoroughly Oriental and Indian teaching. There is a difference between the Asiatic hemisphere, if you want to call it, and the European part. There is a clear difference in the temperament. Okay, and India is the heart of Asia in that sense. Oriental se matlab Asiatic hota hai normally. That which the Occident is the word for Europe. That which the Gita teaches is not, this is the main sentence in this paragraph. That which the Gita teaches is not a human, but a divine action. In Sri Aurobindo's own lifetime, what does he say about himself? Earlier, I thought that I was doing my yoga for the sake of humanity. But then I understood, and then my yoga was doing for the sake of divinity. Right? So, that which the Gita teaches is not a human, but a divine action. Not the performance of social duties. कहीं आपको कोई बोले कि गीता दिखा करके कि देखो देखो तुम्हें तो ये social duty fulfill, even though if that man is having a genuine aspiration for the divine and he stopped from doing it in the name of the Gita, by quoting the authority of the Gita, very important hai, one of the major misconceptions, this can change one's life if put into practice. Not the performance of social duties, but the abandonment of all other standards of duty or conduct for a selfless performance of the divine will working through our nature. How do you know that what is the social duty is what the divine will is? The divine does not get translated perfectly into the society. Collective mein to divine ka manifestation is very, very difficult. It's very complex. Individual mein to phir bhi ho jata hai. In the collective it is 1000, it's multiplied by the number of the collectivity, basically. The difficulty and the distortion, right? For a selfless performance of the divine will working through, not social service, but the action of the best, Shrestha, थर्ड चैप्टर में आता है, द गॉड पोजेस्ड, द मास्टर मैन, डन impersonally for the sake of the world and as a sacrifice to him who stands behind man and nature. अब इसमें we'll have to wait, we don't have any other option, but आने वाले paragraphs में he makes it abundantly clear that the Gita's whole emphasis is on the divine, 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 not on humanity or society or this or that. And the call of God is imperative and cannot be weighed against any other consideration. This is the sentence. The call of God is imperative and cannot be weighed against any other consideration. Many times what happens is by people, who want to manipulate it for their own limited interest or whatever, the authority of the Gita is quoted. देखो गीता में तो ये बोला है कि तुम्हें अपना कर्तव्य पूरा करना है, अपनी ड्यूटी पूरी करनी. Gita does not teach that. Of course, if you will follow truly the teaching of the Gita, all the duties will be fulfilled actually. But the Gita teaches you to do divine action. ये कहाँ गया है sentence? That one. That which the Gita teaches is not a human, but a divine action. This sentence.
पर आपने ये जो बताया ना, इट्स वेरी प्रिवेलेंट इन द सोशल लाइफ.
Yes, अरे it is blackmail होता है. गीता को
हाँ.
यूज करके sometimes the elders blackmail the younger ones,
Yes,
the
yes,
seniors are blackmailing, and all in the
yes.
name of the Gita. And गीता का नाम सुनते everybody चुप. अरे
हाँ, चुप,
गीता पढ़ने का
एग्जैक्टली.
किसी के पास टाइम नहीं है, एनर्जी नहीं है.
नहीं नहीं,
तो
दिस इज ट्रू, वेरी
मैं
ट्रू.
बता रहा हूं, दिस इज, ये एक मेजर मिसकंसेप्शन है जो वो क्लियर करेंगे. अनदर मेजर मिसकंसेप्शन इज दैट यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य, दैट इज मेड द होल पर्पस ऑफ द अवतारहुड. दैट इज नॉट द होल पर्पस ऑफ द अवतारहुड. ही विल मेक इट क्लियर कि व्हाट इज द रियल पर्पस, बट उस पे जब आएंगे तब आएंगे. बाय इटसेल्फ दिस इज सच अ इट्स अ माइंड ब्लोइंग पॉइंट, लाइफ चेंजिंग पॉइंट. यू विल जस्ट, मैं तो बोल रहा हूं शिवम लिबरेट कर रहे हैं आप. ही इज लिबरेटिंग यू. What the Gita is telling you is not human action, divine action, not the disinterested performance of social duty, but sarva dharman parityaja, giving up all duty. But then again, with tamas, that fake surrender. Oh, I have given up all dharmas and I am following the divine. I mean, you know what kind of thing it requires. Better to be honest. Go slowly, जो शिवबंदो बोलते हैं, sunlit path, in a progressive surrendered way. Grow the sattva guna in you and do not be a hypocrite by saying that I have surrendered, whereas actually you are falling into tamas. Obviously, इसीलिए spiritual books गीता के end में बोलते हैं कि this is not to be given to such and such a person, because this knowledge can be so badly misused by a crooked mind. So anyway,
In that earlier
Anmol.
thing you had given,
हाँ,
it was written, right?
yeah, we are done
Uh,
for today, 9:06 already. So
yeah, it
yeah,
was written, right? The path to knowledge is through ignorance only.
yeah. So I'll just read this again. इसको just पढ़ के let's fall into silence and close the session. Not any further this thing I feel. That which the Gita teaches is not a human, but a divine action. Not the performance of social duties, but the abandonment of all other standards of duty or conduct for a selfless performance of the divine will working through our nature. Not social service, but the action of the best, the God possessed. First, we have to be possessed by God. उसके बाद असली एक्शन होगा. The God possessed, the master men, done impersonally for the sake of the world. Oh, so powerful, so mantrik. And as a sacrifice to him who stands behind man and nature. I mean, I hope everybody can feel the power and the ring in these words, these sentences. Right? Okay. Shall we just close with silence? Okay. We'll just observe a silence for half a minute or so and then we'll close. We'll meet on Friday then. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's meet on Friday.